History often remembers its conquerors in marble and gold, but it forgets the screams behind the triumphs, the broken bodies dragged behind the parades, and the queens who paid the ultimate price for daring to stand tall. This is not a tale of glory. This is a descent into humiliation, power, and calculated cruelty, where empire feeds on spectacle and mercy becomes a weapon. This is the story of how Rome punished the women who dare to challenge it. 20 kilograms of solid gold hang from raw, torn flesh. Pause for a moment, feel that weight, not just on the body, but on the soul itself. This is not jewelry, not a symbol of wealth or splendor. This is a device of suffering, engineered with cold precision to crush vertebrae and spirit alike with every forced step forward. This woman is no common captive. She is the most powerful queen the East had ever known. The ruler who dared to look Rome in the eye. The strategist who shattered imperial authority and carved the empire into fragments. Her name is Zenobia of Palmyra. Now she gasps beneath the unbearable weight of a crown reforged into chains, dragging her toward the earth. But the true horror is not the metal tearing into her skin. It is the sound, the thunder rolling toward her from afar. Tens of thousands of Roman throats roaring as one. A living beast, hungry not for victory, but for humiliation. They demand to see the warrior queen reduced to an exotic trophy, paraded for their pleasure. Welcome to the Roman triumph. Welcome to hell dressed as celebration. To understand how a monarch ends here, broken, displayed, conquered, we must return to the fatal miscalculation that sealed her fate. The moment ambition devoured caution. Zenobia believed Rome was dying, and she had reason to believe it. The empire was rotting from within, plague consuming its cities, barbarian invasions tearing at its borders, emperors rising and falling like weak candles in the wind. Rome looked exhausted, vulnerable. She saw opportunity where others saw decay. She seized Egypt, severed Rome's grain lifeline, and crowned herself Augusta, sovereign of the East. It was a brilliant gamble, one that might have worked, if fate had not answered with a man forged for war. Aurelian, no philosopher in purple robes, no soft-handed politician. He was discipline given human form, a soldier who solved problems with steel and fire. He crossed the Bosporus like a storm, annihilating resistance, driving Zenobia's forces back to the gates of Palmyra itself. Hunger followed, fear followed, and finally, desperation. Under cover of night, Zenobia made her final move. The desert wind sliced against her skin as she fled toward the Euphrates. No golden chariots now, only fast camels and raw panic. On the far bank waited safety, Persia, a chance to rebuild. She never reached it. Aurelian's cavalry caught her at the water's edge. There was no duel, no final stand, just rough hands, iron grips, and the Queen of the East thrown face first into the mud like any other prisoner. Her crown fell. Her dignity followed. This is where the true moral fracture begins. Most captured generals chose death over disgrace. A blade to the chest preserved honor. But Zenobia lived. She was dragged before Aurelian, who sat amid dust and dried blood. His officers demanded her execution, a clean message to the provinces. One swing of the sword and it would be over. But Aurelian shook his head. A corpse, he knew, teaches nothing. A living symbol terrifies empires. Rome did not need silence. It needed spectacle. Zenobia would live, but everything around her would die. The trial in Emesa was not justice. It was theater. Her advisors, generals, and philosophers were dragged before the court. Among them stood Longinus, her mentor, her teacher, the mind that shaped her reign. Aurelian gave her a choice without speaking aloud. Live, or let them die. And so the queen broke. With a trembling hand, she named them as traitors. Claimed she had been misled, that ambition had been planted in her by others. It was betrayal stripped of poetry, survival in its ugliest form. The executions were immediate. Blood pooled at her feet. She did not flinch. She cannot afford to. From that moment on, Zenobia ceased to be a person. She became inventory, a possession of the Roman state, cataloged alongside gold, statues, and livestock. Yet Rome's cruelty toward queens did not end with her. To understand the full depth of imperial savagery, we must travel north to rain-soaked Britain to the year 60 AD. There, Queen Boudica faced Rome's brutality in its rawest form. Her husband, King Perseudigus, had foolishly believed loyalty could buy protection. He left half his kingdom to Emperor Nero, hoping to shield his family. Instead, Roman officials arrived not with diplomacy, but with accountants and soldiers. The procurator Catus Decianus sent tax collectors and centurions, legalized thieves. When Boudica protested, they answered with terror. She was tied to a post and flogged like a criminal. Her royal blood soaked into the mud. Her daughters were dragged forward and violated, not in secret but publicly. This was not lust. It was strategy. By defiling the daughters, Rome erased dynasties. It erased futures. It sent a message carved into flesh. Your bloodline ends here. And when they were finished, the girls were thrown aside like refuse, their spirits meant to be broken forever. Rome could be just as merciless to the most refined royalty of the Mediterranean. In 46 BC, Julius Caesar paraded his triumph through the streets, and among the captives walked Arsinoe, sister of Cleopatra. A young woman, fragile in appearance, yet once bold enough to raise an army against Rome. Chained and humiliated, she moved through the cheering crowd, and something unexpected happened. The mob fell silent. Pity crept in, and Caesar, ever the political animal, sensed danger. Sympathy could turn into rage. So he spared her life, exiling her to the temple of Artemis in Ephesus, a sanctuary supposedly untouchable. But Rome never forgets, and it never forgives. Years later, the final lesson is carved in blood. Cleopatra herself demands the death of her sister. And this time, Rome does not hesitate. Mark Antony's assassins enter the sacred sanctuary, violate its holy ground, drag Arsinoe from the altar, and slit her throat where she stands. Her blood spills across consecrated stone, sending a message that echoes across the empire. There is no sanctuary. There is no God powerful enough to shield you from Rome. If the state desires your death, it will find you at the edge of the world or kneeling before your gods, and it will kill you like an animal. That moment burns itself into Cleopatra's mind forever. She watches from afar and learns the most important lesson of her life. Never allow yourself to be taken alive. Because she knows, with chilling clarity, that Rome will not treat her with mercy. Cleopatra is not a pliable child like Arsinoe once was. She is danger incarnate, a foreign queen who bent Roman generals to her will, a woman blamed for corrupting the moral spine of the Republic. She understands that if she falls into Roman hands, her fate will not be exile by the sea. It will be humiliation beyond imagination. A public undoing so grotesque, it will make the suffering of all other defeated kings seem merciful by comparison. And then the day arrives. At Actium, her fleet burns. The sea itself seems to turn against her as Octavian's forces close in. The future emperor advances without mercy, tightening the noose around Alexandria. Cleopatra locks herself inside her mausoleum as the air fills with ash and the stench of an ending. Octavian wants her alive, not out of compassion, but because a triumph without Cleopatra would be theatrically hollow. A Roman victory requires a queen in chains. Messengers arrive, bearing promises of safety and dignity. Lies, all of them. Cleopatra sees the Roman ships, sealing the horizon, and remembers Arsinoe's chains. Boudica's lashes. She knows exactly what awaits her. The final battle is not fought with swords, but with time and deception. Octavian grows impatient. He sends his most trusted agent, Proculius, with strict orders: capture her alive. No blood, No mistakes. What follows feels less like war and more like a burglary of destiny. While one envoy distracts her at the sealed doors, Proculius scales the outer wall, slips through a high window, and descends into the chamber. When Cleopatra turns and sees him inside her sanctuary, instinct takes over. She reaches beneath her robes, not for a weapon to strike him, but to end herself before Roman hands can claim her. He lunges forward just in time, twisting her arm, forcing the dagger to the floor. Her final chance slips away. She is searched like a criminal, stripped of poison and blades, reduced from queen to captive in moments. From then on, her existence becomes psychological torture. Octavian allows her to bury Mark Antony, then locks her under constant guard. Every sharp object removed, every moment monitored. He wants her alive, restored, radiant, because a dying queen is useless to him. A beautiful captive, however, is priceless propaganda. When Octavian finally enters her chamber, the contrast is striking. He is young, cold, methodical, nothing like Caesar's charisma or Antony's passion. He is a bureaucrat of death. Cleopatra tries to move him, not with seduction, but with intellect, bargaining for her children's futures. She kneels, speaks softly, offers treasure. He listens politely and lies effortlessly. His eyes, however, betray the truth, measuring her wrists, already calculating the weight of the chains. Cleopatra understands. She needs certainty. That certainty arrives from an unlikely source, a young Roman officer named Cornelius Dolabella. Moved by admiration or pity, he breaks protocol and whispers the truth. In 3 days, she will be shipped to Rome. She will walk in Octavian's triumph. The crowd will scream, the chains will shine, and afterward, death will come slowly. That is the moment she decides. Not in despair, but in defiance. Cleopatra prepares her final performance. She bathes, dresses in royal garments, adorns herself as Isis reborn. She orders a final feast, and she writes one letter to Octavian, asking only to be buried beside Antony. When a messenger leaves, the doors close. Octavian reads the letter and turns pale. He understands instantly this is not a plea, it is a farewell. He runs for the mausoleum, shouting orders, hoping the physicians can still save her. They arrive too late. Inside, the scene is eerily serene. Cleopatra lies upon a golden couch, life gone from her body. At her feet, her loyal attendants IRAs and Charmian collapse, using their final breaths to straighten their queen's crown. A Roman soldier, furious at being robbed of his triumph, shakes one of the dying women and demands to know if this was well done. She answers with her last breath. It was perfectly done, and worthy of a descendant of kings. Octavian stands frozen. He has conquered Egypt. He has destroyed his rivals, and yet he has lost. Cleopatra has denied him his victory. For a moment, rage surges through him. He even considers defiling her body, but politics restrains his hand. He orders her buried with honor. The myth must survive, even if the woman did not. And yet, Rome still demands its spectacle. And so, in one of history's most grotesque ironies, the empire prepares to celebrate a triumph without the queen it longed to humiliate. A victory hollowed out by the one woman who refused to kneel. Months after her death, Rome still celebrates as if victory itself were eternal. The streets are thick with incense and dust, echoing beneath the rhythm of drums and the thunder of marching feet. Citizens lean from balconies, children are lifted on his shoulders, and every eye is fixed on the triumphal procession advancing through the heart of the city. At its center rolls a gilded platform bearing the image the empire desperately needs to believe in: Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, defeated at last. But she is not alive. What the people see is a crafted illusion, a statue of wax and gold, her features frozen in regal stillness, a painted serpent coiled around her arm, as if frozen mid-strike. It is convincing enough to satisfy the crowd, but not convincing enough to erase the truth whispered between breaths. The real Cleopatra chose death over humiliation. She escaped the final act Rome had written for her. And so the triumph rings hollow. Rome parades in absence, a lie dressed in gold. This moment reveals something ancient and unsettling, that even the greatest empire on earth can be denied its satisfaction. That sometimes the defeated write the final line of the story. But Cleopatra was rare. Most who fell into Rome's grasp were not granted the dignity of choosing their end. Most were swallowed whole by a machine that did not merely conquer, but erased. There exists a fate far worse than death, worse than chains, worse than public shame. A fate reserved for those whose very existence threatened the myth of Roman perfection. One such man was Jugurtha of Numidia. His crime was not simply rebellion. It was truth. He looked Rome in the eye and declared that the Republic was rotten, that its senators could be bought, its justice sold, its morality auctioned to the highest bidder. For this, he cannot be allowed to die quickly. His very existence was an insult that needed to be unmade. When Gaius Marius finally defeated him in 104 BCE, Rome staged a triumph. The city erupted in celebration, banners waving, incense burning. But when the procession reached the Capitoline Hill, the path divided. Marius climbed toward glory. Jugurtha was dragged toward a narrow, nearly invisible opening carved into the stone. The Tullianum. It was not a prison. It was a pit, a hole in the earth that smelled of rot and despair. There were no steps, no light, no mercy. Prisoners were lowered or thrown inside and forgotten. When Jugurtha's body hit the stone floor below, he laughed. Not in madness, but in clarity. He mocked Rome's famed baths, saying this one was far colder than advertised. For 6 days, he remained there. Hungry, thirsty, his mind unraveling in the dark as rats gnawed at his flesh. When death finally came, it was not dramatic. His corpse was dragged out and dumped into the Tiber like refuse. Rome erased him, or so it believed. Yet even that cruelty would be surpassed. Years later, another enemy would be preserved rather than killed, not out of mercy, but convenience. Vercingetorix, the Gallic chieftain who had united tribes and humbled Julius Caesar himself, surrendered to save his people. He believed honor still mattered. It did not. Caesar kept him alive for 6 years, feeding him just enough to survive. Not as a prisoner, as a prop. When the time came for Caesar's triumph, Vercingetorix was paraded through Rome in chains, a shadow of the warrior he once was. At the end of the procession, away from the cheering crowd, he was led aside and strangled quietly. The crowd never saw the end. They were not meant to. Rome preferred its brutality hidden, but history was preparing a reversal. In the year 260, Emperor Valerian marched east to confront the rising Persian power. His legions were weakened by plague, his supply lines stretched thin. Still, he believed the authority of Rome would shield him. He believed the title of emperor carried divine protection. He was wrong. The Persian king Shapur captured him alive. Not to ransom, not to negotiate, to display. Valerian was kept as a living trophy. Each day, when Shapur mounted his horse, he placed his foot upon the bent back of the Roman emperor. The ruler of the Mediterranean became a human stepstool, a living symbol that Rome could kneel. When Valerian died, his suffering did not end. His skin was flayed, dyed crimson, and mounted in a Persian temple. Roman envoys were forced to look upon it, a warning carved into flesh. And still the will turned. Because while Rome crushed others, it could not escape itself. Cleopatra understood this truth better than anyone. She had seen what happened to queens who trusted Rome's mercy. She had seen the chains, the parades, the slow erasure of dignity. When Octavian closed in, she did not flee in panic. She prepared. She bathed. She dressed in the regalia of Isis. She composed herself as a ruler, not a captive. When the doors were breached, she had already chosen her ending. Octavian raged. He needed her alive. He needed her humiliated before the crowd. But she had stolen that from him. Even in death, she denied him control. He buried her with honors, not out of kindness, but necessity. To defile her would have ignited unrest. Rome needed to pretend it had one. Zenobia, too, would live, but only in body. Exiled to a quiet villa, surrounded by comfort, stripped of purpose. Her survival was not mercy. It was a slow erasure. And Rome marched on. For a time. But empires do not last. The same roads that carried triumphs would one day carry invaders. The same marble would crack. The same banners would burn. The same people who once cheered would flee. Because history is not written by those who conquer, it is written by time. And time shows no loyalty. The empire that enslaved queens, humiliated kings, and displayed corpses as warnings would itself become dust. Its monuments would crumble. Its power would fade into memory. What remains are the stories, not of victory, but of endurance, of those who refused to be owned, of those who chose death over submission. And in the end, that is Rome's true legacy. Not its conquests, but the echoes of those it tried and failed to break.